Turn up the dive, feel the vibe, get ready to ignite. Untold stories in the airways, flying through the night. Experience voices, tales so bold. Streaming live, the truth unfolds. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wide variety. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can't hide. Aliens in the attic, UFOs in the sky. Cryptids lurking, oh my, oh my. Ghosts in the hallway, whispering your name. The paranormal, the unexplained. Become a VIP, get the inside scoop. Unlock the mysteries, be part of the group. Live streaming stories, they're talking to you. Super chats buzzing, join the crew. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild ride. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can hide. So if you've got the guts and you want to explore, tune into the untold, it's what you're looking for. From aliens to ghosts and all that's unseen. Untold Radio Network, where the world's mysteries convene.
Good morning, monsters, and welcome to this week's episode of Monsters on the Edge on the Untold Radio Network. Today, we are live here in studio with my guest, Larry Beans Baxter. He is going to be joining us in just a second here. But first, guys, Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society, our new episode from Lee Hample's Hayfield just came out this past Sunday. If you guys have not checked that out yet, make sure you go and check that out. If you guys have not seen our series on the Trail of Undiscovered Beasts on Paraflix, check it out. Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Yowie, Grassman, Skunk Ape, Yahoo, Wild Man, Hairy Man. No matter what you call it, stories of large, upright ape creatures have been reported throughout recorded and oral histories around the world. Here in the United States, though, when you think of these creatures, you probably think of the Pacific Northwest, Washington, Oregon, Northern California, and you would be right. But did you know that Bigfoot has been reported in every state except Hawaii? It's true. Don't worry, we'll be covering all sorts of hairy, scaly, and feathered creatures on this show. But this season, we're going to start out with the ones that are right here in our team's backyard. We're going to focus on Bigfoot in Wisconsin. We're going to travel from the bottom of the state, where a woman had a gourd thrown at her from her own garden, and north to a man who saw one cross the road in front of his vehicle. Making our way even further up to a series of howls reported in the night and a trail of frozen footprints in the snow. Hunters, barkeeps, farmers, and auto mechanics all had run-ins with the big guy. So come along and follow the evidence on the trail of the undiscovered beasts. And guys, now if you join our Patreon at Wisconsin Caps, you get season 1 starting August 1st. We are releasing that for all of our Patreon members over there. You can head on over there and check that out. It's really cool. 8 episodes of On the Trail of the Undiscovered Beast. So head on over and check that out. You can also show your support for Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society by going to our store and clicking on our website and clicking on Shop Our Store. You can find all kinds of merchandise with our logos on it and show and wear your support. If you want to see the Caps team in person, we are going to be at Squonkapalooza August 10th in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, along with all these other awesome people are going to be there, and we will have the Haydn Adventure traveling exhibit there for you to check out as well. We are also going to be at CryptidCon in Lexington, Kentucky in November. And we are going to be in Wisconsin. I don't have it up here yet, but the beginning of November, we will be down in Kenosha, Wisconsin at another event. I got to get that on here. Tonight, if you're in Wisconsin, I am going to be at the Shawano County Library doing a presentation on cryptozoology. So if you're in the area, come on out and check it out. All of this can be found at wisconsincaps.com. Click on our public events page and check it out. If you want to show your support for all things here on the Untold Radio Network, here's how.
Hey, Untold Radio Network fans. Want exclusive perks and to support our channel? Introducing our YouTube membership program with 3 amazing levels. Get loyalty badges that level up to different cryptids the longer you're a supporter. How cool is that? You'll also get access to custom Bigfoot emojis and priority in chat. Upgrade to Backstage Pass for exclusive wallpapers, photos, status updates, discounted books, and merchandise. Go all in with the producer level for everything mentioned, plus member shoutouts. Ready for an enhanced experience? Join now, pick your membership level, and let's make this journey even more exciting together.
All right, guys. My guest today is Larry Beans Baxter. He was born in Kentucky. He spent his youth hunting and fishing in the remote areas of Muhlenberg County. His interest in the unexplained and cryptozoology started at a young age after reading many books on the subject and watching such classics as The Legend of Boggy Creek and In Search Of. He enlisted in the Army in his early 20s and found himself stationed at Fort Richardson, Alaska. Over the next 4 years, he developed a passion for exploring Alaska's vast wilderness. When his military service came to an end, Beans found a career in law enforcement, first serving with the St. Paul Police Department on the remote island of St. Paul in the Bering Sea. After 3 years, he transferred to the Homer, Alaska Police Department on the Kenai Peninsula. After 8 years as a patrolman and attending a variety of training and classes in investigation, he was promoted to investigations sergeant. Over the next 4 years, he investigated homicides, burglaries, missing people, and assault cases. He has been fortunate to participate in 2 expeditions on the remote abandoned town site of Port Chatham in search of the hairy man, or Nantianook as the locals call it, as well as contributing to numerous documentaries and TV shows about Bigfoot and cryptids, including Finding Beasts, In Search of the Port Chatham Hairy Man, The Alaskan Triangle, Bigfoot Encounters in the Pacific Northwest, and Aliens in Alaska. He currently hosts the podcast Alasquatch and has written the first nonfiction book on the subject of Port Chatham, Abandoned, The History and Horror of Port Chatham, Alaska. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, Larry Beans Baxter. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here, man. So my first question obviously has to be, where did you get the nickname Beans?
It's not a very exciting story.
Awesome.
So I've had it since like grade school. There used to be a TV show on. It was when like the Fox network first like came out. They had like Married with Children, 21 Jump Street, a really underrated show called Werewolf, and a show called Beans Baxter. And it was about this kid. He was just a normal like high school kid, and his dad was a spy. His dad gets kidnapped by the bad spies, and he gets recruited to go like be a spy. And his dad's like spy network company, whatever. And I think his name was, apparently, this is a thing. Uh, apparently, Beans is a nickname for Benjamin. And the kid's name was like Benjamin Baxter, and they called him Beans. And my last name is Baxter, his last name was Baxter, and it just kind of stuck. And it didn't hurt that my dad's name and my name were the same. We're both Larrys. So people kind of used it as a way to differentiate between which Larry they wanted. So it just stuck. And now, like, if I'm like talking to somebody and they call me Larry, it's just kind of, I'm like, you're talking to me. It's how I think about it. It's like what I call myself in my head. It's just, I'm now Beans forevermore, I guess. So
Very cool. Very cool. Awesome. Well, it is good to have you here. So you've done a lot of different things. You have a very varied background. It's interesting, with the police background and the military and stuff like that, to establish your knowledge of research and following evidence and stuff when you're out there looking for things, right? So tell us a little bit about that and how that's played into this.
Well, the Bigfoot world, I just see a question in the chat there. Did I have a Sasquatch call as a policeman? I didn't. I work in a municipality in a little town. There is a lot of wilderness around us, but it is a town. We have a population center and a business district and stuff like that. And we just didn't get a whole lot of calls related to wildlife or Sasquatch. There was one where a gentleman was at one of our local parks and called in one night. It's actually a pretty funny story. And said that Sasquatch stole his sack of potatoes. And so me and my partner head up there. My partner, which that's the thing about like military and law enforcement, is most of those guys, they're very stoic about that kind of stuff. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to mention it. Maybe you can get a story out of one of them that's like, well, my uncle said he saw this or that. But for the most part, it's not really something that's talked about a whole lot. So we get there. It was raining. It was muddy. I actually did like walk around the perimeter of the camp. Didn't see any tracks. The gentleman was having some, substance abuse issues. And, we ended up, determining the call was not true. But, if you did like do a records request at my police department and ask for records pertaining to Bigfoot or Sasquatch, you would probably get that record. Even though I don't think it was a valid call. I think the gentleman was just having probably some hallucinations due to chemical substances he was enjoying at the time. And, it's the way it goes sometimes. I think a lot of times, you get calls like that. And then it's almost like the boy that cried wolf. Then when you do get a legit call or a call that could get legit, you're like, this guy is on drugs or meth or whatever. And it almost gets, it hurts the cause, so to say, where you just get so complacent on dealing with all this. I got a call one night. A guy was saying there are people like ninjas on his roof. And I mean, you want, obviously I'm like, okay, this guy is probably does not have people crawling around on his roof. But at the same time, I mean, you never know. Like you see stuff in police work all the time where you're just like, well, I never thought I'd see that. That's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And then, the next day brings something even weirder. So, you try and go into it with an open mind, like, well, maybe there is something going on here. But there was not. There were not people on his roof. But and the best part was he was like, oh my God, there they are. And I'm like looking at the roof and I'm like, dude, there's nothing there. So, that happened a few times throughout my career, but that was really the only Sasquatch related call that I ever had. And, we were able to listen in on the state troopers radio traffic quite a bit. And I don't remember ever hearing any calls from them regarding, cryptids or Bigfoot or anything like that. But again, we're not exactly like, we were in a city, there's population centers around. So I don't think that we get those calls around here a lot. I think those probably happen in like the southeast and maybe like up in the far north.
Interesting. Well, if you want to continue on with the questions, I guess we can take this one right away too. Do you have any reports of Bigfoot stealing kids and putting them in baskets?
No, I've heard that that legend before. I think Thomas Seawood talks about that, and they're I'm probably going to slaughter the pronunciation, the Junaquah. I've heard that, and his suit that he has that he uses at the conferences and stuff has a suit or a basket on the back. Obviously, you know, we do have stories of Bigfoot taking people, of stealing people, and they say the natives here say, you know, when it gets foggy, don't go outside, or the Nantinaq will get you. Nantinaq is basically I'll just say the Port Chatham Bigfoot. That's the local name for their Bigfoot. And there seems to be a very entrenched belief amongst the natives that Bigfoot will steal children and women and other people. But they also have a belief about the Nantinaq that it's a little bit more on the supernatural side, that they can turn you into a Nantinaq. For example, there's a story of Mumchuk, the native hunter, who was out hunting with his tribe one day, and excuse me, he tells his hunting party, "Hey, drop me off in the woods. I'm going to go turn into a Nantinaq and go live with a Nantinaq." And they kind of make fun of him and don't believe him. Well, he starts getting more and more aggressive, so they end up like they don't know what to do with him. So finally, they just let him off on the shore. They're like, "Here, you go, you know, go." And a few months later, they were having a Nantinaq come into town, or near town, on the edge of town, and the people were saying that's Mumchuk, that's the hunter, but he couldn't talk anymore. He could just talk in like whistles and grunts, and they say that, you know, the Nantinaq can take people and turn them into Nantinaqs, much like the Kushtaka, the land otter man. But that's a little bit more on the supernatural side of things, which, you know, I consider myself pretty grounded. I try not to discount that. I don't say that's impossible or that doesn't happen. But, you know, being a police officer and having been trained in the collection of evidence and forensics and stuff like that, I try and like focus on what I can see, touch, you know, feel, hear, smell, things that actually leave physical evidence.
That's good. Back to the original question. Awesome. So, for people that don't know, obviously, I think most people have seen, you know, like the Alaskan Killer Bigfoot, the show and stuff. I've had some of those guys on the show here as well. But anybody that's not familiar with the history of Port Chatham, as you've brought up and stuff, can you tell them a little bit of the history of that? And obviously, like you've written a book on it as well, right?
Right. As far as I know, it's the only nonfiction book. I think there's a couple of fictional accounts of Port Chatham. I think Adam Davies wrote one. It was actually pretty entertaining. There's a character in that book based on me, by the way. Yeah, as far as I know, which I don't check every day, maybe there's another one out. I wrote the only nonfiction book on Port Chatham. It was a little fishing town on the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula. It's not an island. I see a lot of people refer to it as an island. I don't know. I guess because you have to get there by water or plane or helicopter. I guess people think that it's an island. It's not an island, but there's just no roads going to it. So it was a fishing village on the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula. It was established in the early 1900s. It was actually a bustling little town. They had a sawmill, a fish processing plant, a cold storage area, which was big for the time, and a school. It was kind of like a company town. The people that owned the town or owned the businesses in the town basically owned the town. They owned the store, they owned the school, like they ran everything. It was almost like reminds me of a coal mining town like we had in the South, where you had like the company store and stuff like that. So you're gonna have to excuse me, everybody. I'm a little congested. I've got one of those summer colds. So you know, in the 1900s, the town was kind of established, and in the 1920s, I think, is when the workers first kind of started complaining about the Nantinaq. That's their version of Bigfoot. They were saying it was coming into the town or coming to the edge of town and harassing them. And they basically threatened to strike or threatened to quit. And the owners of the fish processing plant basically relented and said, okay, you know, don't quit. We'll bring in some security. So they brought some Pinkerton types, not actual Pinkertons, but some Pinkerton types to come in and pull security on the perimeter of the town. And that made everybody happy. And it seemed, there's not really any official word, but it seemed to deter the Nantinaq, or at least the encounters or the harassment seemed to stop. I don't know if it was because it was an armed presence or it just happened to quit around the time they brought in the security. My money's probably on the armed presence, probably deterred them. And then everything was okay for a little while. You know, there's a few sightings that came out of Port Chatham in the 20s. And, you know, you've got some early Bigfoot activity there. And what is fascinating to me about that is this is all before the Bigfoot boom of, say, the 50s and 60s in the lower 48, where Bigfoot kind of just became a pop culture phenomenon. And you had the PG film and all that stuff in 67. And then Bigfoot was on, you know, he was on TV. He was on $6 Million Man. He was here. He was there. And this was all way before that. This was in the 1920s and 1930s. Bigfoot wasn't really in our lexicon. It just wasn't a thing. And so business continued on. There's reports of missing people. A prospector went up into the hills and disappeared. And, you know, on that stuff, from the research I did, I think probably the number of missing people is probably a little inflated. You know, you hear people say like, oh, there was, you know, hundreds of people went missing. And, you know, since the town was established to when it was abandoned, I don't, you know, I couldn't find anything to establish those numbers. I did find some confirmation, though, that some people did go missing. There were a few mysterious deaths, with Andrew Camluck being one. He was a logger that was found with some head trauma. They said he was hit with a piece of logging equipment that was too heavy for a man to lift. So that's probably the most mysterious one. And from there, things seem to get worse and worse. And the legend goes that in 1950, the town was abandoned and everybody just took off. And I see, you know, a lot of people attribute this to like a Bigfoot massacre. You know, Bigfoot was slaughtering people in the town. And through my research, you know, I found it wasn't quite that. It was more economic reasons than it was Bigfoot or superstition or, you know, actual murders. But at the same time, you know, two things can be true at the same time. There was Bigfoot sightings activity there. And the town was abandoned, but it was abandoned, I think, more through economic reasons than through the terrorizing of the creature. So, you know, it's not quite the Bigfoot massacre that people make it out to be, but there is some, I guess, validity to the story. There's some veracity to it.
Interesting. So you've gotten the opportunity to actually go out there and do some investigating at the location, correct?
Yeah, I've been there twice. Once with Stephen Major filming In Search of the Port Chatham Hairy Man. And then again, the next year in 2018, with the Travel Channel to film the Alaska Triangle episode. And it's kind of interesting because, you know, you get there and there's the one cabin that you can see from the shore.
Mm-hmm.
It's on the cover of my book there. Everything else, all the other like structures and stuff is like back here in the tree line. Like you can't see it from shore. There's still some equipment left over from the fish processing plant. There's, you know, you're just walking through these thick, dense woods. And then all of a sudden you come upon these like big hulking, like rusting machines. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of surreal. If you didn't know what it was there, it would be quite the like, oh my gosh, what are we stumbled onto? So it's a really cool place. It's very, you know, nature has definitely done a good job taking it back. Other than a couple of cabins and the metal structures, you can't tell that there was ever anything there.
Interesting. So I think based on that timeline, you were there prior to them filming and all the stuff with the television show Alaskan Killer Bigfoot.
Correct. We were the first ones to go in there and document a search for Bigfoot. I can't say we were the first ones to ever go in there and look for Bigfoot. I'm sure over the years, probably other people, local people have done it. But we were the first ones to go in and document it.
Interesting. Awesome. So how much of what you saw on that show, like, would you say was legit? We always see things like, on, fantasticized and stuff for television and that. And how much activity did you guys have while you were there? Did you spend a lot of time camping there, or was it just kind of going in and filming?
Well, I mean, there was a town called Portlock.
Mm-hmm.
That's about the extent of. That's about where it stops. We had some interesting things happen there. We had this loud thumping sound that always just seemed like it was just ahead of us as we were walking around. One of the members of our party said that she saw something kind of peek around a tree. It was too far away for her to get a good look at. And then I got some thermal footage of something I can't explain. That's the curse of Bigfoot at work right there, because when I looked through the thermal imager, I mean, it looked like Donkey Kong. And we're there looking for Bigfoot. I see something on my therm that looks like Bigfoot. And instead of hitting record, I hand it off to the next guy. I'm like, hey, look over there and tell me what you see. And I mean, I used to give people a hard time for stuff like that. I'm like, oh, you saw it and you couldn't get a picture, huh? And then it happened to me, and I'm like, I get it. I understand it. It happens. So I did get some footage of it, but what I got on the thermal camera is not an accurate representation of what I initially saw. It looked like, I mean, you take Donkey Kong from like the N64 game and put its outline in black in the woods, and that's pretty much what I saw. But then I passed the camera around to the other members in the group to get some affirmation. Like, are you seeing what I'm seeing over there? And by the time the camera made it back to me, and I did have the presence of mind to hit record, it was it was starting to move away from us, and it was just kind of a blob squatch at that point. But yeah, I kick myself every day for that. I'm like, oh, if only I hit record sooner, it would have been probably some of the best thermal footage ever.
Wow. So how long were you there for each time that you went up?
The first time we were there for 3 days, and the second time we were there for 4 days.
Did you get to, so like, based on like what we know from the television show and stuff, because that's pretty much everyone's only frame of reference at this point, but where were you about camping? Where did you stay up there?
So we excuse me, we stayed on the boat. We didn't camp on shore, and we had discussed camping on the shore, but the problem was we didn't have enough people to do like a 24-hour fire guard.
Mm-hmm.
We would have had to pull multiple shifts. So we were like, I would rather sleep through the night than have to get up 2 or 3 times at night and sit there for an hour and stay awake. And so we were Stephen, the expedition leader, was very concerned about basically our safety and what would happen if we slept on shore.
Makes sense. Awesome. Lee would like to know, have you ever been to the area where the trees were planted upside down?
No, I believe that's on Prince of Wales Island in Southeast. I've never been there. We had an expedition plan to go there, but it was 2020, and that's when everything shut down. And we had the tickets, we had, car rented, we had campsites plotted, and we ended up canceling because of the pandemic.
I think you're right. I think that Lee, if I'm not mistaken, that was Expedition Bigfoot and not the Alaskan Killer Bigfoot show, because I don't remember any trees upside down from.
Well, my friend Chuk has been there, and he went there on, I think it was season 2 of Alaska Triangle.
Okay, I haven't got a chance to watch that yet. That's Ken Gerhardt's show.
No, that's Missing in Alaska.
Missing a lot. Yeah. There's too many shows. Too many shows. Okay. Well, I haven't seen either of those then, I guess. Um, Interesting. Okay. So a lot of the locals you talked about like with the police reports and stuff like that that you didn't get a lot of them in that. I know that um one of the guys from the show was talking about that they had gone out to, Port Chatham and stuff to have all these experiences and stuff, and they kind of focused on that. But he had talked about having them back at their home village as well, and it was pretty much just commonplace there. So is this like an occurring thing, like all across Alaska, like any of the places that you've been? Has there been a lot of activity, or is it just something like you said that nobody talks about up there?
I think it kind of depends on where you're at. There seems to be places where it's a little bit more concentrated than others. Um, excuse me. There definitely seems to be areas where um, there's less activity, and that seems to be around like large population centers, large towns. Sometimes you'll have something happen on like the edge of a town or a population center, but for the most part, your remote villages, places like that, that's where you seem to have a lot of your interactions.
Interesting. But again, like they don't. A lot of the natives and stuff just kind of take that as every day, or is it still, like what do the people say that you do get a chance to talk to up there? Are they more uh just kind of, yeah, it's here, we know it's here, or is it still kind of a unknown? Like, does anybody up there just not believe that these creatures exist at all?
When when I was researching the book, I talked to probably, I don't know, 20 or so people, and it was pretty much 50-50. It was, some of them were like, yep, it's a thing, it's out there, and some of them were like, it's hogwash, it's nothing. And I think it's probably just kind of based along how they were probably raised and probably their own experiences. It's almost like I don't want to really compare it to religion, but it's kind of like religion. Some people, if you go around, you ask people like, do you believe in God? Some people say yes, some people say no, and a lot of that is based around their upbringing and their experiences. And I think Bigfoot's kind of the same way with the natives. I think it kind of depends on how they were raised, if they were raised to believe it was a real thing or not, and if they've had any experiences with it.
Do you find the 50-50 correlation more where the small village versus the larger cities, like you had said?
In my experience, yes, because it seemed like a lot of the people from the small villages here, some of them were absolutely convinced it was a real thing, and some of them were not. Like, oh, I've been hunting in these woods all my life, never seen anything, never heard anything. But then those same people would be like, well, but my cousin did, but I don't know if he's telling the truth or not, or something like that. They all have a story.
Interesting. Well, what kind of other stories have you heard? Is there seem to be any more, the horror stories of what supposedly happened at Port Chatham and that with these creatures? Are they all very foreboding or dangerous, or is there more just like your typical stories of seeing one?
Some of the Port Chatham stuff reminds me a little bit almost of Skinwalker Ranch, where you have a lot of different stuff going on. And my favorite non-Bigfoot story out of Port Chatham, and this is the one I probably get the most comments on from my book, is the story of the one-eyed people. And that was about a group of hunters that were out hunting. They encounter another, they're paddling through the bay in their little canoes or bidarkas, and they see another group of hunters and they don't recognize them. They're like, what, where are those guys from? Those aren't our guys. So they try and paddle over to them, and the strange hunters, they're like they're like turning away from them. They're not looking at them. They're paddling away, trying to get away really fast. And this kind of piques their curiosity. So they're like, who are these jokers? Like, let's go see these people. So they basically have this little race in their canoes, right? And they finally catch up with them, and they get them to look at them. And they only have one eye in the center of their forehead. They're like Cyclops people. And they're basically like, what is going on? And they're like, sorry, we don't usually interact with you guys because, we usually get treated poorly. You're not nice to us. So we have our own village like way over here, and we don't interact with you guys. And they ended up like, trading some meat and stuff with them. And they treated them, fair and kind. And but they never saw them again. And, after they parted ways. And so that's one of probably the strangest stories that I came across in my research for Port Chatham. And I never found any more stories about them, just that one story. And it almost reminds me of like some Skinwalker Ranch type stuff, where you just, okay, like here's the Cyclops people, and then you've got Bigfoot and all this other stuff going on.
Weird. Were they just like normal human size, or were they, like Greek mythology portrays the Cyclops being a lot bigger and stuff? Were they like the size of Bigfoot, or just normal people?
From the story that I found, they were just normal people, just with one eye.
Interesting. Now, there's also some legends and stuff of lake monsters up there. Have you done any research into that, or have you had any experiences with those?
I really want to. Lake Iliamna is not, far from me as the crow flies. It's actually across the bay. And of course, the Lake Iliamna lake monster is said to live in there. And I really, really want to go and spend like a week just on an expedition there and just look around and maybe get some underwater cameras and do some fishing and, just do like a little mini documentary on the Lake Iliamna monster. I would love to do that one of these days.
Have you gotten to do any research and stuff on that already, or is it just something that you want to look into?
Just, I've done some reading on it. I've never actually got to travel there and physically like boots on the ground stuff like I want to do. But I think it's probably some type of sturgeon or giant eel or something.
Interesting. We are going to take a really quick break here so that you can catch up, and we will be back with station identification here. And if you guys have any questions for Larry Beans, put them in the comments and we will get to them right after this.
Show your support for the Untold Radio Network family of shows and join in on the conversation by using super stickers and super chats on YouTube. Got a question you want answered? Ask it live via a super chat and get real-time responses from our show's knowledgeable hosts and guests. Help keep the Untold Radio Network shows running strong. We need your support. Send your super chats and stickers now.
All right, guys, we are back here on the Untold Radio Network. We are live today, so if you have any questions as we go through, please put them in the comments section, and we will get to them as soon as possible. Sounds like some Bigfoot encounters in the comments section, but no questions. So, all right, we are talking with Larry Baxter here. He is a Bigfoot researcher and author from Alaska and former police and Army veteran. So all kinds of good stuff there. So where else have you gotten a chance to do some research and gone out investigating?
Oh, geez. I've been to Bluff Creek, Falk, Arkansas, Point Pleasant, Ohio, what's the name of the park there? Salt Fork there. Had a couple of interesting experiences there. But yeah, it's just my department that I worked for, they were very liberal when it came to training. They would just say, you pick out where you want to go, and if it benefits the department, we'll send you. And I always picked out some place that was close to like a Bigfoot place. I wanted like Bluff Creek or Falk or something like that. And I always take a few days off after my training and go visit. And it was kind of a nice way to get some assistance with travel costs and get down there and investigate a little bit. Most of the time it was just, me playing tourist. I didn't really have enough time to like hike out in the woods and spend 2 or 3 days, but it was just, going to the places and checking them out and seeing what kind of terrain was there. Falk, Arkansas was really interesting because it was like the middle of summer. It's hot. I'm coming from Alaska, so it's like I'm going from 60 degrees to like 80 degrees. And my wife told me, like, she knew I was going down there it was like a swamp. She's like, you be careful down there and you make sure you wear long pants when you're running around in the swamp. And I was like, yeah, okay, sure. And sure enough, like one day I'm like just digging around down there, and I walk out into the woods a little bit, and I realize like, oh no, like I've got my shorts on. I didn't put pants on, and I got something on my leg. I don't know. I brushed up against some kind of plant, and I had like this rash on my leg for weeks. And of course, I had to get home and hear, I told you so. I told you not to wear shorts out there.
Awesome. That's what you get. Yep. I've worn pants in a lot of locations, and we have a lot of raspberry bushes and stuff here. And I come back just all tore up, even with thick pants or whatever, because it's just the places that you go in and dig around in and stuff. Like you said, it's just, you never know what you're going to run across. So
yeah. And a lot of times I'm just driving around and I'll be like, oh, I wonder where that trail goes, and I'll go down it a little ways, and I'm like, okay, I'm not equipped or dressed for this. I'm going to have to turn around.
Absolutely. So you got a chance to go out to Point Pleasant. Was that Bigfooting or for the other creature that's there?
I'm really interested in the Mothman legend. I love the Mothman prophecies. It's a great book, and I just always wanted to go. And we were doing a road trip along the East Coast, and I was like, we got to stop there, have to. So we stopped there and went out, saw the TNT area, went to the Mothman Museum. I did have interesting interaction with the law enforcement there. I took some patches from my police department, and I thought this would be a good way to ingratiate myself with the local law enforcement. And I went and I was talking to one of the lieutenants there, and I took him a patch, and he gave me a patch, which I think I might have. Yeah, right here. Got a Point Pleasant, West Virginia police patch. But while we were talking, he was like, why are you here? Like, why did you come from Alaska to Point Pleasant? And I basically said, I love the Mothman story. And Barnaby, his eyes rolled so hard I could hear it. And so I took it. He was not a fan, so I didn't really push it any further. But I could tell he was like, "Oh God, that again,"
I wonder, did you get a chance to ask him how many reports that they still get about that? Or if
I didn't. After his reaction,
yeah.
I kind of took that as a sign, as like he's just gonna tell me it's a bunch of bunk, and I was like, I didn't want to hear it at that time. I was like, I'm here, like I drove all this way. I don't want him to tell me it's fake.
Yeah, that's kind of a side of that I've never thought of. There's always people, as like that claim, oh, I just saw this thing, I still see it or whatever, and I wonder how many people still, see the Mothman in Point Pleasant and how many reports they still get. Because I know that there's been a lot in the Great Lakes area recently, down Chicago, Milwaukee, even into Ohio and stuff around the bottom of the lake there and that. But I don't know how many are still out in Point Pleasant. It seems like he's kind of migrated.
Yeah, well, up here, we have eagles and all kinds of big birds. So I see giant birds all the time, and I'm just desensitized to it. So I could probably see a Mothman, and I just think like, oh man, that's a big eagle, and just keep going about my business.
Interesting. So you kind of spoke about, like not getting as many police reports or anything from up there where you work and that, but have you gotten any other weird creatures? Like have you gotten any, lake monsters or Mothman or Dogman reports up there? Do you have any of that stuff from up in Alaska?
Not necessarily through my police career, but Rob Roy Menzies, he owns the Bigfoot Art Gallery in Palmer, Alaska, and excuse me, he gets all kinds of stuff reported to him, Bigfoot and all kinds of other creatures. And he recently had somebody come in. It was a hunter that reported for lack of a better term, like a bat squatch.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't have wings or anything, but he just said it had a face, almost kind of like a vampire bat. It was almost like a Bigfoot, but it had like a weird face, like a vampire bat. And if I remember correctly, it might have had backwards knees, almost like a dogman or something. And that really, like, what in the hell could that be? Because he got a really good look at it. He saw it for, several seconds, and it scared him really bad. Like, you could tell it shook him up. And that kind of stuff intrigues the hell out of me. I'm like, okay, well, what is it? Maybe is it a Bigfoot with birth defects? Is it is it something else? And I want to go out to that area and look around if I can get Rob Roy to take me out there just to see if we could find any unusual tracks or anything out there, because that's just what the hell is that,
Mm-hmm. Part of that's like kind of, people are notoriously bad at, being witnesses, right? Like, especially when you see something that's out of place, because your brain is trying to not visually take in what you're seeing, but more is trying to figure out what you're seeing. Like, is that a deer? Is that a bear? Is that what the heck am I seeing? Is that a Bigfoot? No, it's not a Bigfoot. And then you finally come around to this. And instead of, taking in the details like you could be, it's more just trying to figure out what it is.
Yeah. Eyewitness testimony is notoriously suspect. It's always, we would have something simple like an accident, like an automobile accident. And you talk to the witnesses and you get one person tell you, oh yeah, they say it's a hit and run.
Mm-hmm.
One person would say, oh, the car was yellow. One person would say, oh, the car was green. And another person would say, oh, the car is blue. Mm-hmm. And then when you finally do track down the car, you find out one of the witnesses was blind. One of the witnesses was lying. And one of the witnesses doesn't know their colors. It'd be like a red car or something.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of stuff happens all the time. So, you kind of have to take in witness testimony, but at the same time, you have to say, okay, this is coming from a person. It could be flawed. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the gospel truth. And like I said earlier, two things can be true at the same time. Yeah, there was a hit and run, but no, it wasn't a blue car. It was a different color car. So, you kind of have to just take information in and work with the facts. You can't just say, okay, the guy said it was a bat squatch, so obviously a bat squatch. Well, he didn't say there was any wings or anything like that, so yeah. I'm not comfortable calling it a bat squatch, but because the way he described the face of like a vampire bat or something like that, that's the label we're putting on it. But I'm not saying it was like a fly in Sasquatch. He didn't see it fly. Mm-hmm. But yeah, eyewitness testimony is always suspect. You can't just say, the person says they saw this and that's exactly what they saw. I've been wrong. I'll see. I do a traffic stop and the guy gets out and runs out of the car. And I'm like, he's wearing, a red shirt and blue basketball shorts. And then they catch up with him down the road and he's wearing green shorts. It just happens, and people make mistakes. Nobody's perfect.
So with police training and stuff like that, you guys are trained in observation and stuff. Is there any kind of, not to put it in the public knowledge and stuff, what you guys learn in that, but is there anything like any tips and stuff that you can share about being better observers? Like, what do they teach you how to observe things and be able to remember them better?
Well, one of the best things you can do is take notes and write things down. I always say, if you write things down, you don't have to remember them. Even better, sometimes we had audio recorders that we would carry on our uniforms, and we would record conversations. And that way, when I go to write my report, I'm not sitting there thinking, did he say this or did he say that? I can go back and listen to it, and I have the recording, so I don't have to, I don't have to remember it. And then, of course, the best is video, because then you have audio and video of what happened. But those are almost like cheat codes, like that's the, you're playing it on easy mode when you're recording everything.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, everything happens when you're not recording. But take copious notes, practice. Go when something happens, something kind of significant happens in your day, go back, sit down, and write a report on it. Like, what, I went to the dentist today, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And then let it set for a couple of days, and go back and look at it and see how accurate it was. You're like, well, yeah, that did happen, but I also remember this, and see how much stuff you remember. And just do like little brain exercises like that, just doing puzzles, crosswords, stuff like that. Finding the difference in pictures, things like that. All those little brain exercises, all that stuff can help.
Interesting. Possibly even like you write out, like you said, you go to the dentist, write out what happened on the dentist, and then the next day write the same story and see how much it has changed between those, how much the details have, disintegrated or, worn down, or if they're actually accurate. I think that's a very good thing. A lot of the times you hear when people have a sighting or something, or whatever experience you have, to write it down as soon as possible while it's still fresh in your brain. You hear a lot of the researchers and stuff talk about that, and that it does help a lot because of that.
Yeah. And memories can change over time, and that's one of the reasons why as police officers we write reports. I just got called in last year for a case that happened in like 2021, and here I am 3 years later in court, and they're asking me like, what happened? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm gonna have to read. I'm basically sitting on the stand reading my report, because I don't remember. This was 3 years ago. I can barely remember what I had for breakfast today. So I've got to like refresh my memory here. So
how many cases do you take, like, on average? Like let's say you have to go to court for a case. On average, how often do you have to go in for that? Like in an average day or week, if it's not that often, but like in one shift of your job or a week of your job, how many of those cases would you have to remember and go to court off of?
Not too many. You don't have a whole lot of cases go to trial. Excuse me. Sometimes, as the investigator, I'd probably have a little bit more than some of the other guys. But typically, it's usually only like 2 or 3 a year. Most of the time, if you did a good job on your investigation report, they're not going to want to take it to trial. They're going to want to do a plea deal or something like that. So you don't go to court a ton, like maybe, like I said, like 2 or 3 times a year. And most of the time it's people that really don't have anything to lose. They're like, well, there's no way, like if I get convicted of this, I'm going for a long time. So I might as well take my chance with a jury. So we really didn't go to court that often, but you always had to prepare like you were going to, like everything was going to go to court. You had to act like every little I had a B misdemeanor one time, which is like it's like one step above a parking ticket. And me and my partner had this case. That thing it went to trial like 2 or 3 times. Like it just kept going to court, and it kept like getting continued or dismissed for one thing or another. And I remember telling my partner, I'm like, what a waste of resources this is. Like, this is like a step above a parking ticket. And how many times have we been to court over this? Like, how much overtime has the city paid us over this like silly little like misdemeanor? And so it's kind of weird. It's weird how the wheels of justice turn. And in other times, you'd have a really serious case that wouldn't go anywhere. And you're like, why in the world aren't they prosecuting this? And it can be pretty frustrating. There's a lot of low morale in law enforcement these days. And I understand why, because the justice system is like, we're gonna prosecute this guy that parked in front of this fire hydrant to the fullest extent of the law, but this guy that got caught with a bunch of drugs, boys will be boys.
Yep. Now you were how big of a city was it that you were stationed in for most of this stuff?
Well, my first law enforcement job was on St. Paul Island, which if you watch The Deadliest Catch, that's where they offload the crab sometimes. That was only a city of like 600 people. Very small. And Homer is a little bit bigger. It's got a population of 6,000, and it balloons up probably to almost 12,000 in the summertime because of the tourists.
I was gonna say a couple cases a year isn't that much, but I mean, like somebody that like works in Chicago or Milwaukee or like the bigger cities and stuff like that, I'm sure it's a lot higher than that.
Yeah. Well, it's all about perspective too. It's, I knew a guy that was LAPD, and you would talk to him, and like when I lived on St. Paul Island, like there were times when I was the only cop. Like the chief would go off for vacation or something, and the other guy would go off for training, and you're the only cop there. Like you're it. And talking to the guy from LAPD, he'd be like, what do you mean you're the only cop there? Like, what do you mean you're the only cop on duty? And they're like, I wouldn't do that, for all the money in the world. And I'm like, dude, I wouldn't go into LA if you gave me a tank and a platoon of soldiers, like it's all, I guess it's what you're used to and what you're relative to. It wasn't a huge deal for us to be on duty by ourselves. And you're the only cop for like 30 miles sometimes in all directions, sometimes more. And, but the cops in the bigger cities, they're used to having more resources and more people on duty. And they're like, there's no way I'd do that. There's no way I'd work by myself.
All right. Well, if you guys have any last minute questions here, get them in the comments and we'll get them in before we wrap the show up today. Lee would like to know, Thunderbird. Have you talked about seeing a lot of bigger birds and stuff like that down there, but have you done any research? What are the stories of Alaska about the Thunderbirds?
Well, there's a lot of stories about the giant birds, the Thunderbirds. Just outside of Anchorage, there's Thunderbird Falls. Personally, I've never seen anything I would consider a Thunderbird. But there definitely, there's a history of them up here. The giant birds. Sometimes, what are the stellar Seahawks or something? I know I'm butchering it, but there are like the bigger like seabirds that can come up here sometimes. I think they come across maybe the Bering Strait. I think sometimes some of those get confused for Thunderbirds. But personally, I haven't had any reported to me, and I haven't seen any. But there's definitely a long history of them up here, especially like with the natives and like I said, there's a place called Thunderbird Falls named after them. So I don't know if it was I've always wanted to look into how that place got its name. Was it like a nesting site, or was it just where one was seen? There was one a few years ago seen outside one of the villages, and then there was a gentleman in a plane, in like a little Cessna plane. And he basically radio ahead to the village and was like, tell everybody to get their kids inside. There's a giant bird out here. And he said it was big enough that it could have picked up a child and taken off with it. So they're seen occasionally up here. I haven't had any reported. I think that's probably more of an interior thing than here on the coast.
Interesting. Awesome. Well, before I let you go here, tell everybody about your podcast you host and what is that all about and where can people listen to it and find it?
It's the Alasquatch podcast. It's available on all podcatchers. I have a YouTube channel. Sometimes I post videos of the podcast on there. Sometimes I post videos of me going out camping. Just here last week, me and Chuk and Rob Roy went out and camped in Hatcher Pass. So I have some videos up on that. And it's just a general, Alaska, cryptids and outdoor podcast and channel. Sometimes I just talk about life in Alaska and what it's like, here it is. It's Tuesday in December and we're snowed in. Like, how am I going to get out of the house today? So definitely got to have a little bit of self-reliance if you're going to live in Alaska. You can't always depend on services to come and plow your driveway on time. If you got an appointment or something, you got to be prepared to plow your driveway yourself and get out of the house.
Now, where you lived, is that I don't know where the cutoff and stuff that for this is, but do you have the almost full days of daylight or full days of darkness?
We do have extended daylight and darkness, but not like it is. Like the further north you go, the more extreme it is. Like in Fairbanks, it's daylight 24 hours a day, which is here where I live. We get more like 20 hours of daylight and 20 hours of darkness.
Still a lot.
It is. I mean, you go to work in the dark, you come home in the dark. It can get to you. But yeah, the further north you go, the more extreme it gets. But we still do have the extended hours of dark and light in this light down here.
Lee says Lee was in the military as well. She said she had orders to go to Alaska, but they never went through. So,
well, depending on where it was, if it was Elmendorf, you probably would have enjoyed it. If it was like Eielson, you probably would not have enjoyed it. When I first got sent up here, they accidentally sent me to Wainwright instead of Richardson, and when they figured it out, I had to out process and from Fort Wainwright and go down to Fort Richardson. And I didn't understand at the time, but the sergeant that was out processing me said, "You don't know how lucky you are. You're going from hell to heaven." And now I get it. Like they have the really extreme winters up there, like -60 and stuff. And it's a little bit more temperate down in Anchorage. I mean, it still gets cold. They still have winter, but it's not near as extreme as it is up in Fairbanks.
Wow. Awesome. Well, also, before I let you go, tell us where can people get your book, and if you want to hold it up and promote that again.
So it's Abandoned, The History and Horror of Port Chatham. It's available on Amazon. You can also buy it from our website, alaskwatchpodcast.com. If you buy it from the website, I can personalize it and sign it for you. But I do have to charge shipping because Alaska. But yeah, you can pick it up at Amazon.
Awesome. Sounds good. And the links to your website is in the show notes as well. Lee says she was there twice. She's from Wisconsin, and she would have been fine.
Yeah. Oh, Wisconsin has worse winters than Alaska does sometimes. Right. So. Well, I'll tell you, I grew up in Kentucky, and I'm in South Central Alaska here. And, people ask me all the time, like, how do you live up there? How's it, how do you live up there in the cold? And there's times in like January, February, I'll check my weather app and it's warmer here than it is where I grew up in Kentucky. It'll be like 20 degrees there. It'll be like 18, like 28 here. So there's times when it's warmer here than it is where I grew up in Kentucky.
I always point to that one newscaster interview. There was a lady standing on the streets, I want to say out in California or something, and there's this like blizzard conditions going on, and there's this guy walking behind her, and he's just walking in a t-shirt and shorts, and she's like, "Aren't you cold? What's wrong?" And he's like, "No, I'm from Wisconsin." I love that interview. So yep, that about sums it up right there. Well, awesome. It has been a great time having you on here today, and I appreciate you sharing your stories and all your information from up in Alaska, and invite everyone to go check out your podcast. And like I said, the website is in the show notes for anybody that would like to go check that out and pick up a copy of your book as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here, man. You take it easy, stay warm and in daylight or, moderate daylight darkness conditions up there for me.
I can do it.
All right. Take care, man.
You too.
All right, guys, that does it for this week's episode of Monsters on the Edge here on the Untold Radio Network. If you guys are into all things spooky and weird and bizarre. This Thursday, coming up on the Paranormal Spectrum, my guest is going to be Mike Ricksecker. He is the author of actually a book about Alaska as well, I believe, and the Alaskan Triangle, and time travel, and shadow people. So we are going to be talking with Mike about all things weird, bizarre, and creepy, and that'll be a lot of fun. And then, guys, coming up here on Monday next week, right here on Monsters on the Edge, we have Todd Neese is going to be joining us on the show. So that's coming up here next week on Monsters on the Edge. And until next time, guys, thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. And make sure you like, subscribe, and share to all things here on the Untold Radio Network. And until next time, guys, I'll see you on the edge.